Good afternoon, and welcome to We Are Business People, Learning to Market Yourself as a Psychologist. This webinar is brought to you by the APA Practice Organization. The Practice Organization is a legally separate companion organization to the American Psychological Association that advocates for psychologists on reimbursement issues. I'm Jewel Edwards-Ashman, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. I'm here with today's presenter, Dr. Tyson Bailey. Dr. Bailey is a partner at Spectrum Psychological Associates in Linwood, Washington, where he specializes in the treatment and assessment of complex post-traumatic reactions. He is also the practice representative and vice chair for APA's Committee for Early Career Psychologists. Before Dr. Bailey starts his presentation, I'd like to cover a few logistics. Everyone will be in listen-only mode, and if you have a question, please type it in to the chat box. You can also email your question to practice@apa.org. Dr. Bailey will also answer a few questions that were submitted in advance. Please note that this webinar is being recorded, so we will email you a link to the recording within 7 to 10 business days. All right, I will now turn things over to our speaker, Dr. Bailey.
Thank you very much, Jewel, and welcome everyone. Thank you, good morning or afternoon, depending on which time zone you're in, and thank you for joining us. Also a big thank you to the Practice Organization for having me as part of this webinar. As Jewel said, we're going to focus mostly on questions at the end, but I really invite you to ask questions as we go, because if your brain is anything like mine, by the time we get to the end, you won't remember what you started with in the beginning. So please feel free to type questions as we go, and I will also be putting together a Q&A document after the presentation to address some of the things that we may not get to or go into a little bit more detail. So this presentation is constantly evolving and something that I'm constantly thinking about, so that you get the version that is happening in this moment. And marketing, I've discovered, is much like the therapeutic process. Just when you think you got it figured out, something happens, a shift happens, a change happens, and growth opportunity occurs. So the running joke for this is, I know just about enough to be dangerous, and you know, I hope that the feedback from all of you helps me to continue to refine this process, think more critically about this process, like I said, similar to what we do in the therapy room. This presentation and process would not be possible without the guidance of my mentor and marketing guru, Lynn. A big thank you to her for her willingness to share her knowledge with me in this process. A little bit about me: I'm a husband and father to a very precocious 3-year-old. As Jewel mentioned, I'm a partner in a trauma-informed group practice. I'm involved in APA. I'm also heavily involved in Division 56, which is my home division, and that's trauma psychology for those who are not members of Division 56. Based on the questions that I got so far, I think many of you are going to get something different than what you expected today. And hopefully by the end of this presentation, you will understand why I think that's important, and even though it's something unexpected, get something out of it. What we are not going to do today is we're not going to go through the specific shoulds of a marketing material, LinkedIn, websites, social media. We will talk about those things a little bit, but this isn't going to be a how-to for that part. And again, as we get into the presentation more, hopefully that will make sense. What we are going to focus on is the process of developing a marketing strategy, so you can decide which advertising venues make the most sense to get to your person. And we're going to talk a lot about your ideal client or marketing persona, and that is the kind of the general overview of the presentation itself. As I said earlier, please feel free to type questions as we go, and I will address as many as I can in the Q&A document at the end. So we're going to look at what the problem is from a marketing perspective. In my mind, we're going to look at a very brief overview of marketing in general and conceptual things. We're going to look at creating a profile of who your person is. Who do you want in your office? Who do you want to connect with? thinking about what specific advertising methods you may use. We'll briefly touch on ethics and HIPAA, and then we will summarize and do questions. So what is the problem that we're faced as psychologists when it comes to marketing? If you have seen this before, I see your Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Instagram, and Flickr, Pinterest. You're quite the narcissist. Obviously, we want to stay away from this sort of presentation. We want to make sure that we're using these things through the basis of our psychological knowledge. And the more I'm discovering about this process, the more I'm discovering that the process elements underneath are not vastly different from those that we use to create a relationship with a client to move forward in therapy as we go through. So this was my implicit message from my graduate program, and as I talk to more people, seems to be consistent with their experience as well, right? You're smart people, figure it out. You know, we'll train you how to be clinicians, and if you want that business sort of stuff, we may address it, you know, a couple hours here or there, but it doesn't really get into the depth of the material that we need to have and how to run a business. And, you know, I mean, part of that, I think, is deciding whether you want to go that route. Do you want to work for someone else so that you don't have to worry about this, or you have to worry about this less? Sometimes there's some tip sheets, some referrals to specific organizations, such as Psychology Today or therapy sites, but very little focus on how to think through this process and ensure that you are really targeting the people that you want in your office. What this results in is most people start with many of the questions that you posed, which is the specific advertising questions. What should I put on my website? How many pages do I need? What sort of material do I put out on my social media? A subset of that would be how frequently do I need to post? I must have a whatever this is, a LinkedIn, a website, Twitter, because that's what everyone else is doing and I think that I should. And, you know, this, of course, is fueled by an industry, like most industries, where there's books and blog entries and articles talking about all the reasons that you should or should not have some specific advertising modality in order to get to the people that you want to. Which, of course, is a huge change from what advertising used to be, which was primarily magazines, TVs, very high-cost things that were really difficult for anybody to get to that didn't have, you know, millions of dollars behind their organization to buy these slots. So where we're going, and unfortunately I think the audio did not play on this, but I have a very cheesy Mission Impossible theme for this slide, so if you can at least imagine that playing for the moment. Your mission, if you choose to accept, is instead of focusing on those things, put your psychologist hat on and take a step back. Think about the context, think about the people, expand your knowledge, and figure out who it is that you want in your office and how you're going to get to them once you have that person built. So it's really sort of a reversal from where most people go. And I'm hoping that through this process, whatever you do have, if you already have a website, if you already are using social media and Twitter, that this will begin to change how you interact with these tools and you know, start a new conversation with the clients that you want in your office and, you know, increase the traffic that you get to your website or other various tools. So if we think about marketing in general, we have these marketing and advertising and sales things, and a lot of times these things are used interchangeably. And in past, it made a little bit more sense because essentially the marketing thing you could do was to advertise and advertise somewhere. The short answer to this question, are they the same thing, is no. Marketing is everything you do to reach the clients and build awareness. This is from a book, and it's specifically about marketing a private practice, and it's one of the most effective resources that I've discovered when thinking specifically about how to do this in the private practice sector. And the reference is at the very last slide. As I said, you'll see this book quoted a lot in this presentation, and I really appreciate the way that it's put together. Sales is the act of persuading or influencing a client to buy a product or service. So this is actually connecting with the person and saying, this is why you want what I have. when we think about advertising, I really enjoy this quote. It turns out that advertising is a subset of marketing. Marketing being the larger endeavor that involves strategy about every element in the process. In other words, advertising is just one tool that is often a carefully planned and well-orchestrated campaign to convince you to do something. And so, again, this is why I want people to step out of the specific advertising tools, again, LinkedIn, social media platforms, your website, and really think about the process first, and then move forward into the, how do we apply this process? How do we keep things going? How do we push forward to make sure that the clients that we want to have are getting the information they need? So in summary, marketing is the overarching strategy. It's what guides us. In a lot of ways, the strategy is sort of like your theoretical orientation. It kind of guides the things that you do and don't do. It pushes you towards some things and away from other things. And it's something that you want to think carefully through and conceptualize. Sales is the process of conveying the information to the person, and advertising is a specific tool for which to convey that information. And thinking about this from a mindful perspective of mindfully engaging in the endeavor to determine who you want in your office and how you're going to get that information to the person. Because you can have the greatest marketing strategy that you think exists, and if it's not actually in a place where your person is going to see it, pick it up, look at it, click on it, whatever the method is, then it's not going to get that person in your office. And, I will talk about kind of my process through this. And, I built my profile and got it up on the website. And 2 weeks later, my person walked through my door, which, was this sort of astounding thing to me, because it's like, oh, is this really going to work? Is this going to get where I need to do? And almost to a T, the guy that I built a profile for walked through my door and sat down in my office. As a byproduct of this process, some people that don't necessarily fit the profile that I built frequently come in and say, I really heard what I wanted to hear. I heard something that connected with me within your presentation, and that's why I'm here. So I think that there are some offshoots when writing in this way and going through this process that may not be exactly your person, but enough of who you want to work with that it provides you with, the full practice that I think most people are looking for in this realm. So this is a kind of visual depiction that I like of the difference between marketing and advertising. Advertising on the right-hand side, create an ad, place an ad, and that's pretty much it. Marketing is a process where we think about strategy and tactics and plans and how do we implement that, and then how do we measure it. And this is something that us psychologists are really good at, is making sure that we're measuring our progress and knowing the tools to measure how things are going. That goes beyond just, is my practice full or not? So thinking about those measurement tools and how are you thinking critically about who you're pulling in and whether that's meeting the goals that you want them to. Then we continue to refine, because like most psychological processes, it's not an endpoint and done. And then you're back into the developing strategies, and it's a kind of continually evolving process, much like this presentation itself. Any marketing focus, especially older textbooks, you're going to see this thing about the 4 Ps: product, price, place, and promotion. And for a long time, this was kind of the holy grail of the marketing world. It was what people kept coming back to. This is what you need to pay attention to. These are the things you need to know, and this is it. If you do this, you will have a successful marketing campaign. So what those are, the product is the services, what you're trying to sell. So this is, your therapy, to a certain extent you as a person, because you are an important part of the therapeutic equation. Price, what it is you're charging, what are your rates, how are they comparable to other people in your area. Place, where is the service going to take place? Is it, is it in a private practice setting? Is it at a community mental health clinic? What is unique about your place of business? And then promotion, what are the strategies that you're going to use and, connect with people. And so this used to be, if you hired a marketing consultant, these were the things that they would go through. However, a lot of the things that are happening since the invention of the internet, and which really turned marketing processes up on their head, many people are arguing this is old and outdated and no longer relevant. Most marketing places, at least the ones that I've been able to look at, still refer to this, still talk about it, and then there's a more complex process that they go through. And this was the one that came out of Diana's book. And so you look at all of a sudden the complexity that's happening here. And the thing that struck me the most about this, and this might be partially due to the fact that this book is geared towards mental health professionals, but if you look around this circle, value, client need, relationship, sharing, problem solving, openness, conversations, these are things that also make therapy work. These are things that people want to get when they walk into the therapy room is, openness and a collaborative nature, and really starting and maintaining a conversation through some very difficult topics. So the cool thing is as we go through this, that marketing in and of itself has a lot of parallels with the therapeutic process and what helps it to be successful. And one of the big people that's talking about this idea of marketing personas is really talking about conversations. How do you start a conversation with your client before they even walk in your door, before they're even there? How do you make sure that they're seeing themselves, hearing themselves, connecting with the material that you're producing, wherever that material happens to be? Social media, websites, brochures, through presentations that you might be doing, that sort of stuff. How do people hear themselves, connect with you, and say, this is the person that I want to go see to work through whatever it is that they need to work through? Obviously, this also creates more complexity within the process. There's more things to think about. And I think that's why it's so important to think through this process first and decide what advertising message you're going to use later. Because, again, if you put all this, let's use Twitter. So you put a lot of energy into creating a Twitter profile, into, thinking carefully about what you're going to put on and how you're going to cite things and what you're going to share and, all that process. And if the person that you want to be in your office does not use Twitter, then it doesn't matter, right? I mean, you may feel good about what you're doing on Twitter. You may like what you're doing on Twitter, and, it may be really useful for people. But if your person you want in your office does not use that vehicle, then that, from a marketing perspective, that effort is wasted. It might help you in some other areas. It might help you, there is an argument for multiple personas, so it might help you in one area and not the other. But as we talk about this process of creating a persona, I'm really going to push people to start with one and really focus that in, go through this process, because the more complicating factors you have, the harder it is. So with marketing itself, when we think about those, that piece of this presentation, I invite people to go ahead and write in questions now if there are any specific questions on the marketing process itself, the things that we went over, and we'll move into, who is your person? Who is the person that you want in your office? Who are you marketing to? So what we're going to do is we're going to create a profile for this person. You're going to learn about them. You're going to really, really understand them through and through as many different aspects as you can. The person that you're trying to bring in. Ravella is one of the people that's really out there talking about the marketing persona. She's got some great information on her website, and she describes it as a detailed profile, an example of a buyer that represents the real audience, which can form and transform your content strategy in ways you may have not thought possible. And I think when you do this, at the end of it, when you start to get to the nuts and bolts sort of questions, do I use Twitter? Do I use Facebook? Do I use LinkedIn to get to my person? That the end result is your person so well that the answer becomes pretty obvious on whether that is going to be a successful strategy for connecting with the person that you want. And I think that's the transformative aspect of going through this process. So I addressed this a little bit. Can I have more than one? Yes, in theory you can. And I think, especially starting the process, it is a great benefit to focus in on one person, start there, and then go from there. I'm in the middle of revamping my marketing strategy to shift more towards the forensic work that I do and having my website speak more to attorneys who might want to hire me as a forensic expert, because that is the place that I want to grow in my practice the most. I won't lose the focus on therapy because that's still part of what I do, but my primary person is going to be an attorney. So how do we get to know this person? Some of the questions you would think of, basic demographic questions: what's their age, what's their gender identity, biological sex, sexual orientation, are they married, divorced, children, miscarriages, friends, family, kind of what have relationships been for them, throughout their life. Employment, what are they doing? What is the job that they wish they were doing? If they could have it their way, would they stay where they are? Would they be doing something different? How discrepant is the doing something different from what they're currently doing? How much money do they make? Are they satisfied with their salary? If not, how much more would they need to make to feel okay, comfortable? So you can already start to see, instead of just saying, oh, well, they work in the tech industry, which was what my guy did, that we really start to break down and say, well, not only is, there's some discontent here, but here are the specifics of the discontent. My guy made about $65,000. He really wanted to make about 90 in order to feel like things were where he wanted to be, and stay within his role, because he doesn't really have a lot of leadership aspirations of kind of moving up the ladder. He just wants to make a good salary, be able to go home. What's the religious affiliation? Are they currently practicing? If not, why? What's their understanding of spirituality and how does it play out in their lives? Where do they stand on the political spectrum? What kind of cars he or she drive? What would she like to be driving? So when I went through this presentation, and my mentor asked me this question, when she said, well, what does he want to be driving? My first instant response was, he wants to be driving a Gremlin, just because he thinks those cars are funny. He's a little more practical than that, but it was an interesting data point that we got to kind of play around with, as far as where where he imagined himself being, and therefore where therapy might help. So then we start to get to the outside-the-box questions, the things that you might not think about asking. What type of art do they like? What inspires them? What creative outlets do they have? How often do they actually engage in each of these? Might that be something you want to focus on in therapy? What type of music does he or she listen to when they're sad, happy, angry? Kind of what do certain emotions pull for them? How does your person deal with emotions in general? Or, do they hold things in? Are they explosive? Or is it some combination of the two? My guy tended to be, to hold things in until he couldn't take it anymore, and then he would do something impulsive, which became, kind of a cornerstone of our work. What is their favorite place to travel? What goes into that? What is the information that you have that would help you to really understand what drives this person, what they're passionate about? How does this person do in crowds? What sort of guilty pleasures do they have? If they were a TV or movie character, who would they be? And kind of what goes into that? What is their kind of fantasy about getting out there and doing something different? What is their level of risk tolerance? How do they kind of go through the life and decide what to do and not to do based on the risks in front of them? Because behavior change is a risky endeavor. We get comfortable in what we know, and even if it's not working well for us, we don't know what it's going to look like on the other side. So understanding how risk averse or tolerant they are can be an important part of therapy. Always a fun question. I love this as an icebreaker in trainings. If they were a type of mustache, what type would they be? Again, really thinking outside the box and having some fun with it. Again, getting to that, kind of where do they want to be? What would their wildest dreams be? Would they double dip a chip at a party? Over or under on the toilet paper? How would they react if somebody put it the quote unquote wrong way based on their view? This one, when I presented this at another conference, this one generated a lot of discussion, which I thought was interesting. What lessons would they need to learn if they were playing the main character on Groundhog Day. If they're going to waste a bunch of time on the internet, what are they looking for? What are they searching for? What are they doing? Are they spending a bunch of time on social media? Are they looking at car parts? What is it that the person is doing? What would their Patronus be? For Harry Potter fans out there, that one can always be interesting. My son loves Dr. Seuss, so this one always popped into my head. What Dr. Seuss character would they most identify with? Are they a cat or a dog person? G.I. Joe said knowing's half the battle. What would the person say is the other half? How would they respond to that question? What would that tell you about them as a human being and how you might connect with them as you're writing your material? So I realize that's a lot of questions that we went through fairly quickly. Again, you'll have these slides so you can kind of start thinking about this process. And again, I would invite people to type in questions on that part as we're moving through here. Kind of what else would you like to know? How do you see this working for you? What problems do you see? Are there any other questions that you would think would be important to ask your client? So now what? So we've gone through this process. We know our person. My guy was Tim. He drove an Accord but wanted to drive a Gremlin, in theory, or at least have that be his other car. But he really kind of liked the idea of a small SUV because it's practical and, that sort of thing. He was definitely an under on the toilet paper. Sometimes he just left it on top because, he didn't really want to do it, and that created problems at home. So we really start to know this person. Now what? Now you open up your word processor. Not a web program, not Twitter, not Facebook. You open up your general word processor and you write. You write to your person. You don't write with anything specific in mind. You don't say, okay, this is going to be the home page of my website. This is going to be the other page of my website. This is going to be those things. You write to the person, and then you later will go through the process of grouping that material together, very similar to qualitative sort of analysis. What hangs together? What are the things, the thematic things that make most sense? And that may tell you some things about where you're going with your various material. And this is the hard part because we get caught up in the, oh, well, I have to have a website. I have to have this. I have to have this. And so I'm going to write to that. But then you start to lose the strategy. You start to lose the process that helps guide those specific things. A really important part of this process, find your person. Once you have them built, right, you think you know this person. You have gone through all these questions. You've answered the questions. But you don't really know until you connect with the human being that you're trying to connect with. So try to find them. So for my guy, he was in the tech industry. So being in Seattle, we have quite a bit of that around, and I worked on trying to find people to connect with that I could take out the coffee and ask some of these questions. They helped me refine my material a little bit. And then when the guy walked in, 2 weeks after I put up the material on my website, it gave me an opportunity to ask him, what brought you in? What helped you to think that I'm a good match for you? How do we help create that together? And so again, it further helps you to decide where is this material going to go and refine it so it really speaks to that human being that you want in your office. You can always ask if the person is willing to review the material. If you connect with somebody, that is close to your person, would they be willing to look at the material and offer their reactions to it, positive, negative, kind of what are they getting out of it. So when it comes to any question in the marketing process of being stuck, trying to write something and it's not going very well, trying to put something together and you're having a hard time conceptualizing how to do it, whether something fits, do I use a website? Do I have this component on my website? Do I use Facebook? Do I use Twitter? The question is, what does my person want? Right? I ask myself this over and over and over again. What does Tim want? What does Tim want to see on this, on this piece that I'm building? How will Tim know that he is finding a person that he can connect with? And then kind of pulling that together and, producing the content and then going through lots of editing, lots of revisions, and lots more editing, and lots of revisions, and lots of frustration as we go through. And sometimes if you get stuck enough, again, this is where it helps to have a person that has similar characteristics, because then you can actually go ask the person, what is it that you want? What is it that you want to see? So this section is going to be pretty brief because, as I look in the ethics code, the advertising section is written pretty broadly for the purposes of going across the advertising spectrum. So there's a summary here that I'm not going to read all the way through. It is a summary of the ethics code sections from Kuchar and Keith Spiegel. They do have a CE session online that I think is really helpful, kind of PDF document that walks you through and gives you some specific examples of this. My summary, we'll get to that in a second. HIPAA, HIPAA again is focused on protected health information. So a lot of the marketing stuff on HIPAA is written about using PHI in the marketing process. So just like the release of information in any other place, it requires an authorization for PHI to be used in the marketing process. And then we would still want to do the best we can to protect confidentiality. But I think sometimes this does come up against the ethics code, which is that we're not allowed to actively submit or request information from people like testimonials and that sort of stuff. Because of the work that I do, I tend to be pretty err on the side of caution on this sort of stuff, and I don't use any sort of material on that as far as protected health information goes. Keeping in mind that people can, if people want to, it's like if you're at a party and somebody walks up to you and says, hey, this is my therapist, they have the right to do that. But if you walk up to the person and say, hey, this is my client, then there's a problem there because you have broken confidentiality. And so that's one of the main things to think about with HIPAA. If you do a blog post, somebody makes a comment, and then you disclose that that person is your client, you have broken confidentiality, and that is the issue. If a client comments on your post, that is not necessarily a problem, although I think it's worth processing in session and talking with them about it and having a pretty clear policy around how you work with that. I have borrowed my policy. Unfortunately, I can't remember the name of the person. She's also involved in APA and has done a lot of thinking about this, about how I handle those situations. And it becomes something to talk about in therapy, much like the other things that we do. There are some great secure email services out there that you can encrypt your email if somebody emails you and then you email back, Hushmail or Virtru. Make sure you get a business associate agreement. If you don't have a BAA, then you are not fully HIPAA compliant. So make sure that the services that you're using have that option and that you actually have it in your hands or in your records, that it's not kind of off there in cyberspace. So in a nutshell, ethics, be honest. Think critically and carefully about what you're saying. And really the honesty is the big part. Don't overstate your credentials. If you're trying to get to somebody and this is a new area for you, be open about that. The person needs to know before they walk in your door that this is something that you recently got trained in, or is an expanding area of knowledge for you. Don't exert undue influence. Don't try to get your clients to write things positive about you. They may or may not do that, but if we're exerting influence, we could be causing problems in the therapeutic process. My stance is play it safe. Don't use PHI in marketing. I think that makes it a lot easier. You can speak to your person without using any protected health information of any of your current or former clients. There's obviously a lot more that can go into this, and again, I do recommend Kuchar and Keith Spiegel's PDF on this that kind of walks you through some of the process and some of the pitfalls of the marketing and advertising realm. And again, I think the default is to go back to the ethics code, think about this from an advertising perspective, because if you're putting it on a website or a brochure or anything like that, or social media, it is now a marketing advertising piece, and the ethics code applies. So to wrap up, from Diana's book, marketing used to be mostly about advertising. Affecting marketing today is about building relationships and engaging communities. I think this process does that, really starts to build a relationship with the person that you want in your office right away. As you think about how do I get to this person, it also can create some sense of community because you're reaching out. You may do presentations someplace at no cost to the place because you believe that that's where you might connect with your clients. And so it's, when you're going to give back, if you're going to do this from a marketing perspective, how do you grow that relationship and that sense of community from every aspect of what you're doing in the marketing realm? Focus less on a destination, a website, social media, and more on the process. The more you focus on the process, the more I think it becomes clear what to use to get to the person that you want in your office. And most of all, don't forget about your psychologist hat in this process. There is a ton of overlap in this marketing process and endeavor, and those are the things that I tried to highlight. So while we may not have got some of the nuts and bolts things, how to manage money and that sort of thing in some of our graduate programs, the thinking critically, the pushing out and thinking globally and really connecting with people is something that we're trained very well at. So think about that as you go through, and that process starts before the person even walks in your door. And I think that that's a really critical component of this process. So some of the questions that I pulled from what was sent previously, and then we'll get into any other questions that folks have, and I can certainly pull out more if we need to. Again, any question of should I use fill-in-the-blank advertising method? What does your person want? How will they see what you have? Will they see what you have? Will they connect with that thing? Whatever it happens to be. And it really kind of, in my mind, takes the guesswork out of it because you know your person so well. You know if that thing you're using is something that they're going to use on a regular basis. This is a specific question. Since the use of social media is so prevalent, how can a practitioner stand out among the crowd? I believe by engaging in this process, you do stand out. I think many people are doing I'm doing this because I have to or I'm supposed to. And they don't have a clear focus on what they're posting. They don't necessarily think critically about what they're posting or reposting or sharing, and kind of how that speaks to the person that they want in their office. And so I think by doing this and really shaping your message through your profile, that it does have you stand out as a human that is, thinking about this process and engaging in it differently. Is it possible to eschew social media entirely when building a practice in the 21st century? Yes, unless the persona you're marketing to uses social media as their primary method. If that is your person, then not using social media is going to be a problem. My guy doesn't use social media. He has a very love-hate, more on the hate side of social media. Part of what's influenced my decision to not use social media from a professional standpoint is also my forensic work. And so, that is something that I kind of grapple with, and I often ask myself that, maybe I should do a blog or something like that. And at this point, based on my marketing profile, it's not what's going to get my person in my office. As I build my new marketing profile, that may change. And again, that's kind of the evolving process. Separating from personal and professional, I think this is generally a really good idea. With your personal side of things, make sure you're using an email that doesn't link back to you. If I had my personal email and it was under my professional or personal Facebook page and it was under my professional email, then people can find me. If the email that I use is tysonbailey@gmail.com, people can find me. So using something that is, really different that people wouldn't necessarily associate with you. And then again, thinking carefully about what it is on your professional site that you are putting on there that is allowing you to connect with your person. Having a really well done social media policy, again, I borrowed mine from someone else. I'm happy to share my consent form. It's also on my website. You can take a look. And really talks about the ins and outs of the process, what happens if, a person comments on something, connects with you in some way, that sort of thing. From the personal profile standpoint, I think it's really important to have that as locked down as possible, keeping in mind that people can still, if they stumble across your profile, they can still see your pictures, at least on Facebook. So, and that's the primary one that I use, from a personal perspective. Do you have successful examples? Ali Mathieu is excellent at this. I highly recommend checking out his material. He is connected on all sorts of social media. Does a really nice job of thinking through things and putting material out that's consistent with his view of the world and his clients. I haven't talked to him to know if he's done a similar process to this, but it would appear to me that he has, based on how he puts together his material and the sort of stuff that he puts out there. In my mind, there's nothing inherently different about social media versus any other advertising method, except for that people can connect in a different way. That does add a little bit of a different element. But when it comes from the ethical implications and how we put information out there, this is another advertising tool that is, different than a brochure and the same. And so I think as you go through this process and think about that it kind of helps, again, guide how you're going to do this. One of the things that I hear a lot, I work a lot with, primarily with trauma survivors, and sometimes they're distressed and they want to hear me, and they will read my website, and they, kind of hear me speaking through those words, and it helps them, reduce distress. And I would imagine that if I was doing a blog post or something like that, that might be another place that they would go and read the things that I'm saying, because they would be pretty similar to the things that I talk about in the room with people. How do I manage social media marketing with a full-time job? Part of it is determining how frequently does your person expect you to post. What are they going to be looking for as far as material goes? Plan accordingly. Know if you can do that. There are some great, scheduling programs out there. One I use is Hootsuite.com. For other organizations that I'm involved in. There is a fee associated with it, but you can schedule things. So if, Friday afternoon, you block out an hour to kind of schedule things across your social media, and then that's all you have to do, and it will shoot those things out on your various accounts based on, your timing. So there are ways to do it. If you hire a company, keep in mind that from an ethical perspective, you are responsible for what they do, so you have to make sure they really understand the ins and outs of our profession and our job as far as ethics and HIPAA goes. So that kind of speaks to the next question. Think critically about that. I think it is possible to do, and it is a time-consuming thing that doesn't necessarily generate income in that moment. As opposed to doing an hour of therapy or doing some assessment or consultation. So you do have to think, kind of carefully about that. And with that, I will turn it over and we'll finish up with some questions. And thank you. Thank you all for being part of this presentation and listening. And I look forward to having more conversations about this in the future.
All right. Thanks so much, Dr. Bailey. So we're going to answer a few of the questions that have been submitted live during this webinar, and I just want to remind everyone that you can ask your question by typing it into, there should be a chat box on your screen, an area for Q&A. So just type that in, or you can email your question to practice@apa.org. So our first question here comes from Dr. Carol Oseroff, and she has an ethics question. So her question is, as far as soliciting testimonials, it is my understanding that the APA Ethics Code states that we can't solicit this information from current therapy clients. In my situation, I've recently moved 350 miles away from my previous place of employment. How about soliciting testimonials from agencies with whom I have worked? Teachers, contract managers, parents, school principals, with whom I have worked but who are not my clients?
So my default answer on this is it's always good to use the ethics resources at APA because they have some great organizations, and the State Psych Association. I know Washington State Psych Association has an ethics hotline you can contact, and they do a really good job of helping people walk through this. Based on my understanding, if it is a professional relationship that you've had, because the big piece within the ethics code is the undue influence piece. So if it is some professional relationships, I believe that's okay. You know, that it would be okay to, you know, ask if they would be willing to provide, you know, some information that you could pass on to potential, you know, referral sources or potential organizations that you're going to work with. I believe that is okay to do, providing there's no undue influence. Given how far away you are from, you know, your place, I think it makes sense that there would be limited likelihood of undue influence, and especially because it's not clients. So that's really where we want to focus on those things. Is if clients get in the mix, then, you know, we have to be really careful about how we, you know, use those things or whether we use those things.
All right, thank you. You might have mentioned this earlier in the webinar, but we have a question from Dr. Lindstrom. She's asking, what is BAA? It's an abbreviation of some sort.
Oh, yeah, sorry, it's a business associate agreement. In all these lovely acronyms that we have, so HITECH, which is an acronym, is the part of the HIPAA code that talks about electronic, you know, media and advertising. And a business associate agreement is essentially an agreement between two parties, a covered entity like myself as a practitioner, and an organization. So, like, if you use Hushmail as an example, Hushmail takes some of the responsibility, or equal parts responsibility, for maintaining the confidentiality of the emails that I send through their program when the BAA is signed. So it is basically an agreement that says we understand HIPAA, we understand the importance of security, and we, in addition to you, are taking on you know, responsibility for making sure that information is safe, secured, and encrypted. So that's what a BAA is a business associate agreement between the organization that you pay money to, like Hushmail. Virtru also has a HIPAA compliance package, but it's really geared more towards group practices than it is individual providers as far as the cost goes. You know, so that's one of the things you want to look at in any of the services that you use for storing information. So another one would be like file sharing apps like Dropbox or Simplicity, or the Microsoft products, the Google Suite products. Some of those will sign a BAA and some of them won't. So for instance, Dropbox, at least to my knowledge, does not sign a BAA. So if you use that to store confidential information, I would quickly switch to one of the other programs that will sign a BAA with you as a person.
Okay, thanks. We have another question here. This one comes from Dr. Carrie Holland. She says, I direct a psychology training clinic. We have a small number of student clinicians who provide services. I'm concerned about marketing too successfully. When does a waiting list hurt you?
That is a really good question that I wish I had a solid answer for. And I think most of my experience in this realm would be in my internship site, because I helped manage some of the wait list, and then I continued on in postdoc and provided supervision. It is a question that we constantly struggled with, and we also tended to do really long-term work at our site, so our rollover was relatively small in comparison to a lot of the training clinics that will give like 10 to 12 sessions. I don't have a specific number where you can start to say, you know, well, you know, at 40 people or at 6 months. I think where we ended up capping it at was, or, you know, kind of started really pushing people to look for something else, was when our wait list was at 6 to 9 months. And, you know, that was a really tough decision and something we talked about as a team. So it is something that you have to think about, and it is something that you have to go through, and it probably needs to be part of your marketing material that you already have a wait list, or that you carry a wait list, That might be something on your website or on your marketing material that you have to rotate in and out depending on where you are in the wait list, so that people know that right off the bat. Because if somebody reads your marketing material and says, wow, this is the place for me, and I should be able to get in pretty quickly, and they call up and you say, well, sorry, you've got a year-long wait, that's going to be really hard for the person. But that's one of those. If you discover a really solid answer to that, please let the rest of us know, because it is a really, really hard question to answer.
All right, thanks. This one comes from Dr. Lauren Rowland. Do you refer to my person in the singular for a reason instead of clients or people I would like to have as clients in plural?
Based on this process, yes, because you really are focusing on a single person, recognizing that as you build that profile, that it will likely speak to multiple people, right? I mean, obviously, if we did this marketing process and it only brought one person in my door, that's not going to sustain me as a therapist. And so it gets to that slide that we talked about earlier, which is, yes, you can have multiple personas, but I really recommend starting with one, because otherwise it can just get way more complicated way quickly. And even though I've been through this process a couple of times, as I start to look at the split between, what do I want to say to therapists or my therapy clients, and what do I want to say to attorneys, it's already pretty muddy, which is making the process take a lot longer. So when you're building a profile, you are building a profile to an individual person or the characteristics of this person, with the understanding that, you hope that more than one human being reads that and feels heard in it. And like I said, I was really surprised how many clients I've had who have come in and said, I really heard myself in your website, and I really think you're the person that I want to work with based on that material, even though they actually weren't very close to the profile that I built. So I think that going through this process and expanding out tends to bring in more people, but that's why it's so focused, the language is so focused on a singular person.
Okay, great. We have another question here from Dr. Gold. With this presentation, I'm hearing that psychologists will need to move quickly to a cash basis, since the trend for mental health is outside the healthcare system. We don't seem to be getting hired by hospitals and agencies. I hear that we need to invent a niche that will attract our ideal customer, our ideal patient or customer, maybe even move away from therapy to working with other professionals like attorneys. Yes, how do you work full-time and have this cash basis / social media active practice? What would your website be?
So I know there's certainly people out there that are talking about that, kind of fee for service is going away. I certainly haven't seen that in the Seattle area. I mean, we are on insurance panels in our group practice, most of the major panels in our area, and that's where we get a lot of our referrals from. I think that again, it's about looking at your area, where you are in the country, what city you're in, who's the person you're trying to bring in, where do you want to expand that a little bit, where do you want to push that out and try to pull in people, and therefore what training will you need? For instance, if you're going to go into forensic work, having really good training in that area is important. Not just going in by default, but kind of having some mentorship and some training in the focuses of how the legal system interacts with what we do. That question I'm probably going to have to follow up on with in the document, because it seemed like there was actually kind of more than one question in there. How do you manage your time? Kind of how to think about and pay attention to the changing healthcare landscape and what that looks like. And I guess my default on a lot of that stuff is is consult. Find people that are doing similar things, take them out to lunch, take them out to coffee, hire them as a consultant, kind of ask those questions and make sure that you're pushing forward and getting the information that you need. But again, I can, Jewel, if you can send me that question and the rest of them, I will make sure I answer that in more detail in the written document, since we're also close to running out of time.
Yes, definitely. I'll send you that question. And yeah, you are right. We are basically out of time for our webinar, so I want to thank everyone for signing up to hear Dr. Bailey's presentation. If we didn't get to your question, I'm so sorry, but like he said, he will address it and a follow-up, some follow-up materials that we will send to all of you. And also everyone who registered will get a copy of the recording of this webinar within the next week or so. So thank you so much for attending. Thank you, Dr. Bailey, for that wonderful presentation. I just want to note that this webinar was hosted by the APA Practice Organization, which is a legally separate companion organization to APA. Because of APA's tax status as a charitable organization, APA cannot legally engage in work on reimbursement issues or the kinds of advocacy that protect practitioners' economic and marketplace interests. That's why the practice organization exists, to advocate for psychologists and look out for their professional interests. For more information, please visit apapracticecentral.org. Again, a recording of this webinar will be sent to everyone who registered. And members of the practice organization can access additional resources about marketing and building your practice on our website at apapracticecentral.org. And it looks like Dr. Bailey has posted his contact information here. So if you would like to reach out to him directly, you can see his website and his email address right here on the slides. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, everyone. It was a pleasure.